People say change takes time, gradual progress, small steps compound. You've heard this everywhere. It's comfortable advice that keeps you stuck. Real change doesn't happen gradually. It happens in a single moment after months of accumulated tension. One decision, one day. Everything shifts. You've been trying to change for some time now. Has it been 6 months? Or 2 years? Or even longer than that? You read the books, watched the videos, understand the concepts, yet nothing moves. You remain exactly where you were, cycling through the same patterns, telling yourself you're making progress when you're rehearsing stagnation. The problem isn't your discipline. It's not willpower. You're attempting to change your actions without changing who you are. There's a mechanism behind transformation that nobody explains clearly. Why some people break their patterns in days, while others stay trapped for decades. Why clarity hits like lightning for some and never arrives for others. Transformation doesn't follow the timeline you've been sold. People who actually change their lives don't gradually improve. They hit a breaking point. Tension builds until staying the same becomes more painful than changing. Then they shift. Completely. Permanently. We're examining why change happens in single moments, not slow progression. Why your current approach keeps you trapped in the same identity. And the exact protocol to trigger the kind of clarity that makes distractions irrelevant and action inevitable. Near the end, you'll work through questions that force you to confront what you've been avoiding. This is for people sufficiently fed up with their lack of progress. The protocol takes one day to complete. One day to see clearly what you've been tolerating, what you're protecting, and what you're actually building. One day to break the pattern you've been running for years. You say you want to change, lose weight, start the business, leave the dead-end situation. Your words sound convincing. Your actions tell a different story. You're not where you want to be because you aren't the person who would be there. Think about someone successful, a founder running a company, an athlete with discipline, someone living the life you claim you want. Do you think they force themselves to do what they do? It appears that way from outside. They can't see themselves living any other way. The actions you view as difficult are natural to them. Eating well isn't grinding through willpower. Eating poorly would require force. Showing up isn't discipline. Not showing up would feel wrong. Your current lifestyle creates your current results. Different results require a different lifestyle. Permanently. That lifestyle must become who you are, not something you perform until you reach a goal and revert. Most people miss this completely. They try to add discipline on top of an identity that rejects it, like building a house on sand, then blaming the tools when it collapses. The foundation determines everything. You think you lack discipline and need more willpower, better habits, or stronger systems to finally break through. This is a wrong diagnosis. All behavior is goal-oriented, meaning every action serves a purpose even when it looks like self-sabotage. When you scroll instead of work, you're not lacking discipline. You're actively pursuing a different goal. When you stay in the situation you claim to hate, you're not lacking courage. You're pursuing safety, predictability, an excuse that prevents you from looking like a failure to everyone watching. Your unconscious goals override your conscious intentions every time. You say you want financial freedom while pursuing comfort. You say you want transformation while pursuing maintenance of your current identity because changing it feels like dying. Real change requires changing your goals at the fundamental level. Goals are lenses. They determine what you notice, what matters, what seems possible. Wrong lens, wrong life. You can't achieve goals that contradict who you believe you are. The identity layer runs deeper than intention. Until you change it, you're fighting yourself with every action. As a child, you had one goal: survival. You depended on others to teach you how to survive. You had to conform. When survival requires adopting beliefs that aren't yours, you stop thinking for yourself. Your identity formed through reward and punishment. Behaviors that got approval became part of who you think you are. Behaviors that got punished became things people like you don't do. This identity you constructed started defending itself. When someone challenges your beliefs, your body reacts like it's under threat. Fight or flight. Your beliefs became you. You identify as the type of person who works the safe job, the type who doesn't take risks, the type who talks about change but never moves. This identity feels like reality. It's conditioning. Most people defend their conditioning until they die, convinced they chose it freely. They experience discomfort when reality contradicts their self-image, so they adjust reality, not the image. They rationalize, justify, protect the familiar story about who they are. Breaking this pattern requires seeing it clearly, seeing how your current identity was constructed, and choosing to construct a different one. Tension builds when you feel out of place in your current life. The gap between who you are and who you could be becomes unbearable. You're sufficiently fed up. That's dissonance. A gap opens. You don't know what's next. Most people retreat here. They run back to the familiar because uncertainty feels like failure. Uncertainty is the space between identities. You've let go of the old one, but haven't solidified the new one yet. Discovery follows if you stay in the gap. You find what you actually want, not what you should want. What pulls you forward with force that makes distractions irrelevant. When this hits, you make years of progress in months. The question becomes how to reach that breaking point without waiting for crisis. How to navigate the gap without retreating. How to discover what you want clearly enough that action becomes natural. You need questions that excavate your psyche, force you to confront what you've been tolerating, what you're protecting, what you're avoiding. Most people never ask these questions. They stay comfortable in quiet dissatisfaction until life forces them out. If you are finding value in this, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and share with your friends and loved ones. Thank you. Let's get back into the episode. The protocol works in layers. You define the life you refuse to live. This will be referred to as your anti-vision. Most people only focus on what they want. That's weak motivation. Knowing what you will not accept is stronger. You interrupt your automatic patterns throughout the day. Force yourself to notice what you're actually doing versus what you say matters. Awareness precedes change. Without it, you operate on autopilot forever. You synthesize insight into direction. A minimum viable vision, clear enough to start moving. Vision grows through action, not contemplation. The protocol takes one day because tension has been building for months or years. You've been ready to change. You needed permission to see clearly. What follows is uncomfortable. If you're not ready to confront what you've been avoiding, stop here. If you're sufficiently fed up with your lack of progress, the questions begin now. They're designed to break autopilot, to force clarity, to make avoidance impossible. Answer them honestly in your head. That's where the real work happens. Picture your life if nothing changes. 5 years from now, same patterns and same complaints. Same Tuesday on repeat. Where do you wake up? What does your body feel like at 10 p.m.? Then another 5 years pass by. The opportunities that closed because you stayed stuck. The people who stopped believing you'd change. You never broke the pattern. What was the cost? If you felt disgust while imagining that, then you're already further ahead than you think. That's the energy you redirect toward what you're building instead of what you're tolerating. Write one sentence, what you refuse to let your life become. This is your anti-vision, the future you're moving away from. People drift toward outcomes they never named because they never defined what they're running from. You just defined it. That energy, the revulsion at what you're becoming if nothing changes, becomes fuel. Fuel that burns when you see yourself choosing the patterns that lead there. When you catch yourself on autopilot moving toward the life you just named as unacceptable. You've identified what you're refusing to become. That creates energy. Now redirect it toward what you're actually building. 3 years from now, different life, average Tuesday, where you wake up, what you do, who you're with, see it clearly. That person, the one living that life, believes something confidently and positively about themselves you don't believe yet. Complete this. I am the type of person who... Whatever you wrote, that's the identity shift required. The gap between who you are and who you need to become. Throughout tomorrow, catch yourself on autopilot. When you reach for the phone, when you avoid the work, when you choose the comfortable path, take a pause and ask yourself, what am I protecting by doing this instead? The answer reveals your unconscious goals, the ones overriding your stated intentions. You're not lacking discipline. You're pursuing something else. Safety, comfort, protection from judgment. Seeing this clearly breaks the pattern. You can't pretend anymore once you've caught yourself choosing the life you claim to hate. One day of honest observation shows you everything. What you're actually optimizing for, who you're actually becoming, the direction you're actually moving. After observing yourself for one day, clarify what you noticed. What assumption have you been operating from? Name the identity that created your current patterns in one clear sentence. Then ask what assumption feels more natural, the identity beneath the conditioning that you've been suppressing. You're recognizing what was always there and dropping the learned identity that never fit. Tonight before sleep, recall a scene that would naturally occur from this natural assumption. Something mundane like a Tuesday morning, a conversation, or a simple decision. The kind of moment that person would experience without effort. Experience it from inside in first person. Feel your body in the scene and notice the details. How does it feel to move through that moment as yourself? Stay in it until it feels familiar. Not exciting or dramatic, just natural. You're becoming acquainted with who you actually are beneath the conditioning. Repeat this practice nightly. The natural assumption becomes familiar to your nervous system through repetition. Actions that felt forced begin flowing automatically as you occupy the state where those behaviors already belong. Change happens when you shift the assumption you're living from, rather than forcing new behavior from an old identity. You recognize what's natural to you and let actions flow from that recognition. Your nervous system accepts repeated assumptions as reality. So when you consistently experience yourself this way in imagination, your actions shift to match without requiring force. You've seen what you're refusing to become and identified the natural assumption beneath the conditioning. Now you're making that assumption familiar through nightly practice. You don't maintain new behavior through discipline. You occupy the state where that behavior is simply natural. The person you described already exists, but has been suppressed by a learned identity that never fit. The protocol removes interference by showing you which assumption you're operating from through one day of observation. Naming what's natural in one sentence clarifies the shift. Nightly visualization makes the natural assumption familiar to your nervous system. Actions follow naturally when you stop performing someone else's idea of who you should be and start occupying the state that was always yours. Leave a comment with one sentence about what you noticed during the protocol. What assumption have you been living from, and what feels more natural? The protocol takes one day to see clearly what's happening. Anti-vision reveals what you're refusing to become. Observation shows which identity you've been operating from. And nightly practice makes the natural assumption familiar to your nervous system. You're dropping the false identity rather than building a new one from scratch. Transformation fails when people try changing their behavior while maintaining the old assumption about who they are. They force new actions from an identity that naturally rejects those actions. Exhaustion builds, and they revert back to what felt familiar. You're doing the opposite by changing the assumption first, so behavior follows naturally when you occupy the right state. Run the protocol starting tonight. One day of honest observation, one sentence naming what feels natural, then nightly practice until the assumption becomes familiar. You already know who you are beneath everything you were taught to be. As we conclude here, I want to thank you for listening. There's more to explore. See you on the next episode.